Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's WorkSafe Tasmania month webinar, Mindfulness in the Healthcare Workplace, a Participant's Perspective. I'm Stephanie from WorkSafe Tasmania and also the coordinator of WorkSafe Tasmania month. I'll also be your moderator for this afternoon's session. Before we do get started though, I'd appreciate you taking a few moments to read the following slide about information delivered during WorkSafe month sessions. So I'll now go over a few items so that you know how to participate in this afternoon's webinar. So we've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer screen in the upper right corner. You're likely listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. However, if you'd prefer, you can join over the phone by selecting telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You'll also have the opportunity to submit text questions to this afternoon's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You can send your questions in at any time during the presentation. We will collect these questions and address them at the end of today's presentation. We are also recording webinars that we run during WorkSafe Tasmania month. We will progressively make those webinars available on the WorkSafe Tasmania website, so please do look out for them after the 30th of October. Lastly, before you do leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate you taking a few moments to complete that feedback, provide us with your comments about this afternoon's presentation, and also your webinar experience. So it is now my pleasure to introduce you to Sandra Roberts from Tasmanian Health Services South to run this afternoon's presentation, Mindfulness in the Healthcare Workplace, a Participant's Perspective. Welcome, Sandra.
Okay, so thank you again, Stephanie. I'm the team leader at the Workplace Health and Wellbeing Service at the Tasmanian Health Organisation in the Southern Region. My current role is an occupational health nurse, and I have a background in midwifery and education in training. I've worked in health for a very long time, since 1981 when I was about 10. No, that's not quite true, since I was 18. So, okay. Next slide. Stephanie, I can't, that's it. Okay, so this title is Mindfulness-based Stress Reduction in the Healthcare Setting, and it's a personal perspective. Now that's really important because I'm not an expert in this field. To be a mindfulness-based stress reduction facilitator, you need to have had hours and hours and years of training. It's really a vigorous course to do, and you need to be a really skilled facilitator, and you need to have had fantastic personal practice in order to be able to help other people learn mindfulness. So I've really just dipped my toe into the water, but I have personally found profound benefits, and really that's what today's presentation is about, my benefits of mindfulness. Okay, so why mindfulness? I am someone that likes to research everything. Excuse me for a moment, Stephanie, this is echoing. Is it echoing with you? No, good, okay. I'm someone that really likes to research things, and my research actually told me that mindfulness practice invites you towards greater balance, choice and participation in life. Now, why did I need some more balanced why did I need a more balanced life, and why did I need to participate more in my life? Well, my reason was I was actually in a lot of pain, physical pain. I'd had an exacerbation of an old back injury, and all my tricks and strategies to cope just weren't working anymore. I spent many hours in bed after work, lying down, looking at my iPad and looking different things, researching what I could do next to possibly solve my back problem. And I came across a book by Vijamala Birch, and this book was called Mindfulness and Chronic Pain Management. I'm not quite sure if that's the correct title, but that was what the book was about. And although I didn't consider that I actually had chronic pain myself, I was interested in some of the things that she was saying, and some of the things were really relevant. Now, I might add that I'd had chronic pain for 3 years, and that did make my pain chronic, but I wasn't quite at the point where I'd accepted that. So Vijamala recommends that you, rather than hardening away from the pain, you move towards pain. You notice the pain. Pain itself is not static or constant. There are movements, just like waves, and it comes and it goes. And moving towards the pain was actually very counterintuitive for me. I'm actually quite stoic, and I thought that I would just get through it and push through. I've got a little clip here from Vijamala, and this is what I came across on the web that kind of inspired me. The clip is a little bit clunky. I would recommend that you just clock what she says.
Loud. I like to describe mindfulness as simply being awake, being really present to your life as it happens, not being lost in the future, worrying about the past, but just being right here, right now, in your body, aware of your thoughts, aware of your emotions, and then you can make choices how you respond to your experience. So it's that moment of choice that comes out of mindfulness that's so life-changing. Mindfulness as a treatment, for example, in mindfulness-based pain management, which is the program that I've developed, it's really very, very simple. Hard to do, but very simple conceptually. And it is this idea of being really present to your experience. If you've got discomfort in the body, if you've got pain in the body, it's learning to turn towards that experience and to come into a relationship with it. Because usually we're pushing it away. It's the last thing we want to acknowledge. And because we're resisting it and pushing it away, paradoxically, we're dominated by it through omission. It's like having the monster in the room. So you turn towards it and you think, okay, what is going on here? And we have lots of methods to train in that. We've got meditation practices, body scanning, breath awareness, learning to work with your thoughts, learning to work with your emotions. You come into a relationship with it, you can make choices about what is the appropriate next step. If you're in a lot of pain, it might be to take a break. It might be to have a lie down. If you're feeling stiff, it might be to go for a little walk. If you're hungry, it'll be to eat. If you're feeling very distressing thoughts, you note those. And to look at your thoughts rather than from your thoughts is a very different experience. If you're very, very angry, you think, oh, I'm really angry. That's different from being lost in anger because you've stepped back a little bit and you're turning awareness back in on your own mental, emotional, and physical experiences. So the treatment process is you're really just training in that again and again and again. We call it practice. It's a little bit like learning a musical instrument. You have to do the scales to become proficient. So we do meditation practice to become proficient and skilled at coming into a relationship with our own direct experience and then learning how to respond more and more creatively and helpfully over time.
Can we go to next slide? Okay, I'll just go back one. Okay, I'm sorry about the quality of that video. I hope you heard what she had to say. Vijamala is particularly interested in the area of self-compassion, and she's had chronic pain herself since she was in early adolescence. And that self-compassion is a thread that comes through, being kind to yourself first, and just being generous with your own thoughts and feelings. And I really recommend that you have a look at her work. About 10 years ago, I attended a session at the hospital. It was put on as a staff development program, and a guy by the name of Craig Hassard, a Melbourne-based GP, came over, and he did some work with a large group of people. There was probably 40 people there, and he talked about how he was using mindfulness with medical students, and he was having fantastic results with these students. Their stress levels, their cortisol levels were coming down, and their results were really improving. One of the things that he talked about that really stuck with me, and I loved, and I used it a lot with my kids when they were little, was the image of passing trains. If you think about a train and you think of a train station with lots and lots of trains going absolutely everywhere, you have a choice as to whether or not you jump on that train. And if you treat your thoughts like passing trains, you can decide which ones that you actually want to go on to. And you may not want to choose to go on to a particular train of thought. That's perfectly okay. And just being aware that you have that choice is a fantastic thing. I actually went out and I bought a Thomas the Tank Engine little toy and stuck it on the bench for a while at home, and used it regularly with my boys. So about the same time that I saw Vijamala's clip on the YouTube, I saw Pamela Lovell's mindfulness-based stress reduction course advertised in the paper. And I thought, well, look, I really know a lot about mindfulness, so I'm pretty good at it. I've done a lot of relaxation. I really don't need to do the whole course, but it might be interesting professionally. I'm in occupational medicine now, and it could be really useful to use with some of my work colleagues that are very, very stressed. Now, I'm not stressed. I'm fine. I'm perfectly okay. I didn't really think I needed all of the information. I really did need that information. I really did need it, believe you me. Okay, so what is mindfulness? John Kabat-Zinn defines mindfulness as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Now, John Kabat-Zinn is the guru of mindfulness-based stress reduction, or stress, yeah. He's got a PhD in molecular biology, so he's not medically trained, but he's worked for the Massachusetts Medical School for many, many years. He's an emeritus professor there. In 1991, he published Full Catastrophe Living, and that's been re-released many, many times. This program has been running since for about 35 years. The program itself is 8 weeks in duration. It's 2.5 hours a week, and it goes over the benefits of mindfulness and the risks of stress and the risks of mindlessness and how damaging that can be. It talks also about the challenges to being mindful and meditating and learning to work with those challenges. And it does this by different types of meditation, body scanning, sitting, formal, informal meditation, and gentle stretching and yoga. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the attitudes towards meditation, because they are really key and they filter out throughout your entire life if you allow them to. The attitudes, if you like, are the scaffold to the meditation. And anyway, here they are. The first one is non-judging. Now, non-judging is really a big challenge for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, particularly in the healthcare environment. We're actually trained to judge, to sum up a situation quickly and to make a decision. So, you know, we like to do a bit of judging. So mindfulness is cultivated by paying really close attention to your moment-to-moment thoughts as best you can without getting too caught up in those thoughts. You don't have to decide whether that thought is a positive thought, a negative thought, or whether it's a neutral thought. It's just a thought. Like the trains that Craig Hassett gave us the image of, another image is often used is clouds passing by. They are neither positive nor negative, nor are they neutral, they're just clouds. And you treat your thoughts the same way while you're meditating. Trust is a second attitude. Every thought and feeling has a reaction in the body. The body knows how to react, and we've trained it to react. If you think about how people stand when they're feeling happy or sad, what their posture is if they're feeling triumphant or in defeat, then their body actually shows them what they're thinking. We just need to be trained to pay attention to what is going on in our body. And quite often we miss the cues that our body is telling us and we just go on mindlessly. So coming back to your thoughts is a really important way coming back to your breath is a really important way of dealing with thoughts and feelings, just coming back to your breath over and over and over again. Beginner's mind. That's another thing that's really important. Not getting caught up in your thoughts. Oh, that's a new thought. That's a weird thought. Looking at your thought like it's an objective observer. When you start looking at things with a beginner's mind, it refreshes you. We're all experts in our field, and often we get very bogged down by what we see, and health is a particularly dangerous area. We often just go into autopilot as a method of self-protection, and we don't look at things with fresh, open minds. So focusing on the breath, coming back to the breath, and allowing your body to take care of itself with a beginner's mind, with fresh eyes, very, very critical to meditation. Patience. John Kabat-Zinn actually says that to be patient is simply to be completely open to each moment, accepting it in its fullness, knowing that, like the butterfly, things can only unfold in their own time. Practicing makes us notice just how many thoughts rush through our mind, the constant chatter of our mind. A lot of what we say in our heads is actually complete rubbish and not worth paying a lot of attention to, but we do. So when we practice, it reminds us that we don't have to pay attention to every thought and feeling. It reminds us that we don't actually have to fit activity into every possible second as well. Non-striving. So when you meditate, you can't rush it. You can't have an agenda. Today I'm going to feel very, very calm. It just doesn't work that way. You have to just allow yourself to be. One of the things that I find that when I'm meditating, I start going over the musts, I should have done that, I must get round to that. And that is really interesting that I notice that I'm doing that. And one of the strategies that I do is I actually start to label my musts and I should and, I've got to do this or I have to do that. I start to label them as either must or should or past thought, future thought, useless thought, all of that kind of thing I do over and over again. There's an old saying, and I don't know where it came from, but I have heard it a few times. Everybody should meditate for at least 20 minutes every day, unless you are really, really busy, and then you should meditate for 1 hour. And I think that's got a lot of merit. acceptance, self-compassion and humour. John Kabat-Zinn's definition of healing is actually acceptance. We waste an awful lot of time trying to deny and resist things as they actually are, and allowing yourself to accept things as they are is really helpful. Letting go and letting be, the last attitude of mindfulness. This story is about how to catch a monkey. If you have a monkey and you want to catch it, what you do is you put a banana inside the coconut, and the monkey puts its hand in the coconut and grabs hold of the banana, and because it's got a fist, it can't actually get its hand out, so it's trapped. It needs to let go in order to be free. So what we covered in our 8-week course was the things, it was completely based on John Kabat-Zinn's program, and the course was facilitated by Pamela Lovell, and she's a really fantastic facilitator, and I'd love to just give her a little plug here. She's really fantastic. One of the things we did was a sultana experiment, and I would recommend that you try that at home, or if you don't like sultanas, try chocolate and pop it in your mouth, but before you actually taste the sultana, really spend some time observing that sultana. So look at it, smell it, listen to it, see if you can hear it moving as you twiddle it in your fingers by your ear. Fiddle around with it for a few minutes before you actually put it in your mouth. You will find that the taste of the sultana is absolutely amazing. So we had homework, and I wasn't that keen on homework. I actually thought that I probably wouldn't do the homework. I thought, oh yeah, I'll just go in and sit and listen, but I probably won't do the practice. I'll just, yeah. But I did the practice, and I really enjoyed it, and I think it was very essential to the success of the program. So as you can probably tell, I really love this course, and I found it very, very interesting, and it had profound effects on my own personal life, and I thought, well, this has got to be useful in the workplace. I spoke to Pamela, and she was really, really interested in trying to get together mindfulness-based stress reduction for health practitioners. There's really good evidence out there that it makes a big difference for health professionals and for everybody else for that matter. But getting in and being able to access a group of people is challenging. So we were able to get a grant from WorkSafe, and that grant went towards paying a small amount of money towards the cost of doing the mindfulness course for health practitioners. It was held once a week in the hospital after hours, and we've actually had about 50 people come through 3 courses, and they range from doctors, nurses, allied health professionals, social workers. It's been hugely successful, and the feedback has been really positive. So why would you, I apologise about this slide, I hope you can see it a bit better than I can see, but why would you want mindfulness in the healthcare setting? Well, the research shows that it increases empathy, it increases focus, it increases problem solving, flexibility, emotional regulation, work satisfaction and resilience. It decreases medical errors, burnout and exhaustion, worry, anxiety about the past and future. Now, who wouldn't want their health professional to have some of those wonderful results from mindfulness? So medical practitioners and health professionals and a lot of other professionals as well, workers, they are trained to react really quickly. But not everything is an emergency. We want our doctors to be able to work quickly and our nurses to be able to work quickly, but not if it's not an emergency. Now, this clip, I'm hoping it's going to work because it actually shows how mindfulness helps the brain dampen down and helps you work effectively.
Understanding how mindfulness works is by looking into the circuitry of the brain. And so we all have actually a handy model of the brain, which is actually our hand. So if you take your hand and fold your thumb into the middle of your palm and your fingers over, this would be an example of a brain where the person's eyes are here, the top of their head is here, their brain is connected to the body itself at the spinal cord, which is represented in your wrist. The way the brain is composed, its architecture, helps us understand how mindfulness works. If you lift your fingers up and lift your thumb up, we go to the first part of the brain in the skull, which is here called the brainstem. And this is where you have the regulation of the body and where you also have the fight, flight, and freeze response that are created. This area of the brainstem, a very primitive area, works together with the next area that's on top of it called the limbic area, and this is represented by the thumb. The limbic area helps generate our emotions. There are parts of it that help us feel our feelings. We also distinguish different aspects of memory. And in particular, this limbic area responds to our relationships. Okay, now this limbic area and brainstem area, they work together. And because these are below the next area of the brain, the cortex, we call them subcortical. A lot of our impulses, our automatic behaviors, our just innate learned reactions to things, our instincts, are driven by these subcortical areas, including information that comes up from the body itself. Your heart pounding, your intestines churning, feed up to the limbic area in the brainstem and get you all revved up. So that's a kind of loop that creates what we call our emotional state. The cortex developed when we became mammals also, as the limbic area did, but the front part of this cortex, from your second to last knuckles down to your fingernails, the front part developed when we became primates, and this part where your fingernails are is called the prefrontal cortex because it's the frontmost part of the frontal lobe. This is the part that's most developed in humans. And it's this part that gives us the ability to pause before acting on an impulse. And the way it works is there are fibers that come down from this middle prefrontal area that actually calm down the irritable limbic area or brainstem area. Literally, this prefrontal region regulates the lower subcortical, limbic, brainstem, and even bodily areas. So in many ways, what we think happens is mindful awareness practice creates a state of activation in that moment that in a way harnesses the power of this prefrontal area in that moment. As you repeatedly practice something, that state can become a trait because neurons which are firing together wire together. So with the strengthening of this prefrontal area, what happens is, for example, if a child is angry and the brainstem is activating a fight response, the limbic area works with that to develop a feeling of fear. There's a sense of betrayal by what happens. So you're really angry, you're burning up, your heart is pounding, and everything is going to get you to fight, to get a knife, to get a gun, to hit someone, to do something really violent. But your prefrontal cortex has you pause. And the very parts of the brain that allow you to pause are also the same part of the brain, this middle prefrontal area, that allows you to have insight into what's going on. My heart's pounding, I'm really angry. Empathy for someone else. Maybe that guy didn't mean it, or maybe he's doing the best he can. And then even a sense of morality. So when we develop the middle prefrontal areas, we actually can not only pause, but we can think of the larger social good and enact a behavior that's better for everyone. And that's where mindfulness really alters things like bullying, like violent acts of aggression. And it's where mindfulness can change the world, literally one person, one relationship at a time.
Thanks, Stephanie. Okay, I'm sorry about the volume there just at the beginning of the end of the video. It's a bit hard to control here, yeah. Okay, this next slide talks about that space in between thoughts and reaction, and that's where mindfulness really helps. It gives you the space, it decreases your reaction threshold so that you have more time to make that clear judgment, and the time may only be a nanosecond, but you have time. So I love this saying. It's by Viktor Frankl, and it says, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. A human being is a deciding being. So another thing that I think is really interesting is a guy by the name of Rick Hansen, and he's another really important mindfulness person, and he talks about having a Velcro mind for the unpleasant. And I think back to my midwifery career and my nursing career in general, but in particular I don't remember very many of the really beautiful births, and I know there were lots, but I can remember the really tricky, awful situations. And we are wired to have a negative bias by about 3 to 1, and being aware of that is part of allowing yourself to be more positive in what you do. Now, we're often bombarded with really unpleasant situations, and sometimes it's hard to pick those little pleasant moments out, and that's where mindfulness actually really helps. Okay, Dr. Hassad says what we practice we get good at, and that's whether it's getting stressed or finding peace of mind, and I think that's really, really true. I've put House in. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dr. House, but he's absolutely revolting to his patients. Hilarious to watch on TV, but appalling to work with. So you don't want to be surrounded by a whole heap of negative, difficult people. Jack Cornfield is another mindfulness person who is very, very well regarded in the field of mindfulness, and he spends a lot of his, his focus is on compassion, and compassionate for himself and others, and nurturing yourself as you would nurture a small child that was in your care. And when something is not going as well as you want it to go, just gently and calmly and kindly bringing yourself back to your breath and back to that feeling of calm. And lastly, I would like to put this slide up. It's a quote from the Cinderella movie. The movie was not great, and there goes my judgment. I was forced to see it with a 10-year-old friend, and she loved it, but I thought it was fairly average. But her mantra I loved: have courage and be kind, and that's a mantra that I try and use quite frequently. And that is it. Do you have any
So thank you very much for your presentation this afternoon, Sandra. Mindfulness in the healthcare workplace, a participant's perspective. We did run a little bit over time, but please do, if anyone does have any questions that they would like to send through to Sandra via the questions pane on the control panel, please do. While we are sort of waiting for any sort of questions that do come through, again, I do remind you that we have recorded today's webinar. It will be available on the WorkSafe site after WorkSafe Tasmania month ends. We are still running free sessions next week. We are continuing to run our webinars. We are also running live feed sessions. So all day Monday we're at the University of Tasmania in the Centenary Lecture Theatre. If you can come along and participate in the live panel discussions we have running all day, please do. Otherwise, have a look in the WorkSafe Month program for the University live stream link, and again, like the webinars, watch from the comfort of your workplace or your home computer. Sandra, a question that has come through. I have friends who do not relax, do not stop for lunch, and leave work late. How do I get the message across?
Look, I really don't think that there's much you can do, because I have worked with people a lot over the years who've done exactly the same thing, and I think that you need to model really good behaviour yourself. So if you take your breaks, and it's ultimately their choice as to whether or not they choose to do that. So model good behaviour and recommend that they do it, and just gently keep offering. I think my husband, after years of seeing me doing some mindfulness, has actually started doing some himself. So eventually, if you model good behaviour, they sometimes come on board.
All right, thank you for that response, Sandra. Again, if there are any a few questions, we've still got a few moments before we do close off. And again, WorkSafe month finishes on the 30th of October, so do head to the WorkSafe Tasmania website to have a look at the program. We have the program of events on the WorkSafe site, or you can just head straight to the calendar of events. And on that note, I would very much like to thank this afternoon's presenter, Sandra Roberts from Tasmanian Health Service South, for presenting this afternoon's webinar, Mindfulness in the Healthcare Workplace, a Participant's Perspective. So thank you very much, Sandra. Thank you as well to everyone who has hooked into this afternoon's session. We do hope that you hook into any further events, and on behalf of WorkSafe Tasmania and our presenter today, we hope that you have a good rest of the day, and that it is a safe and healthy one. Thank you, and thanks, Sandra.